The marble floors gleamed like a showroom. Not a smudge on the white columns. I could hear my own shoes tapping with each step, light and slow. Dax walked ahead, already smoothing his tie and checking the mirror by the entrance. "Did she really bring that bag?" his brother muttered as I stepped inside. I didn't pause. Just kept walking my linen shoulder bag, swinging gently at my side. The same one I took to community events, to board meetings, to the hospital when Dax's appendix burst. It carried papers better than any clutch. The dining room smelled faintly of orange oil and beef. Mahogany walls. Chairs too heavy to pull with one hand. Landon Hartwell stood when I entered, napkin already folded in half across his plate. "Glad you could make it," he said, but his eyes dropped to my shoes. I nodded politely and took my seat. The meal unfolded like theater steak, plated with Tong's crystal glasses filled with Cabernet. No one asked how I was. No one mentioned the foundation or the funding work or the quiet portfolio that paid for half the city's grant programs. Landon wiped his mouth, then reached under the table and placed a folder beside my plate. "I've been thinking," he said, tapping the edge. "It's not right having you just float around. I've drafted a role. It's steady work." I opened it slowly. A staff badge. A job title: Facilities Custodian. Hartwell Development HQ. Annual salary $32,000. Uniform provided. Reports to Building Operations Manager. Across the table, Dax poured more wine into his glass. Not mine. "We believe in helping family," Landon said. "No shame in honest labor." The room had gone very still. I folded the letter cleanly, slid it back into the folder, and tucked the whole thing into my linen bag. My hand brushed against the legal envelope inside it, the one his board hadn't seen yet. I raised my glass, took a slow sip. Let the silence sit. It tasted sharper than I remembered. By the time dessert arrived, I'd already made my decision. And by morning, I'd be back in my own house, watering succulents, calling the lawyer, and opening the confirmation email. The porch light flickered once when I stepped onto the adobe tiles. I'd meant to change the bulb. Something about the gentle hum of old wiring comforted me now. I dropped my keys into the ceramic bowl by the door and slipped off my shoes. The floor was cool the way it always was after sundown in South Scottsdale. In the corner, the succulents leaned slightly toward the window. I took the watering can from under the sink and tipped it carefully over each pot agave echeveria, that little jade with the cracked leaf I never pulled off. The house smelled faintly of sandalwood and lime cleaner. I lit one of the older candles, the ones I made myself before things became too busy. The wick caught fast, burning low and steady. My laptop chimed from the dining table. I didn't hurry. The screen glowed with the new email. Subject: holding transfer finalized from Marlin and Pine Trust. Group date 9:41 p.m. Body 49.02% ownership stake successfully consolidated under Maristella Quinn Trust Holdings. Hartwell Development effective immediately. No fanfare, no ceremony, just confirmation of a shift they would never see coming. I pulled the manila folder from my bag and laid it flat on the table. Inside, certified deeds, voting rights, breakdowns, the silent capital trail that had taken 8 years to weave clean. The phone blinked. I tapped once. Julian's voice came through, calm as always. "We'll need to prepare the board declaration by Thursday. I'll courier the binders." "Make it a morning delivery," I said. "And Maristella, keep your line open." I opened the spreadsheet next. The Monday list. Outgoing transfers. Jan 2, $3,500 disbursed to Diana Phelps Startup Scholarship. Confirmed. $950 to Golden Pines Assisted Living Tucson. Recurring. I stared at Diana's name for a moment. 22 mechanic's daughter. Big ideas in solar glass. I remembered her shoes, bright pink sneakers with inked stars on the rubber soles. The kind of girl no one in the Hartwell dining room would have noticed. I closed the laptop and pressed the folder shut. The candle was still burning strong. Thursday was circled in red on the kitchen calendar. Legal review, board preparation, quiet power, and somewhere across town, Dax was probably still explaining why I hadn't smiled back. The doorbell rang just after 8, before the sun had cleared the ridge. Dry heat already coiled across the porch tiles. I didn't hurry. Through the window pane, Dax still in his pressed shirt from the night before, holding a paper bag with a ribbon handle. I opened the door halfway. He lifted the bag like it was a peace offering. Apricot danishes. From that place you like off Camelback. I stepped outside, letting the screen door whisper closed behind me. He followed me to the porch chairs like nothing had ever burned. The metal seat creaked under his weight. I stayed standing. I just wanted to talk. My dad was... He rubbed his jaw eyes, scanning the yard. He was trying to offer something. Stability. You didn't need to embarrass him. A slow breath pushed past my ribs. I sat, palms resting flat on my thighs. He offered me a mop. He offered you a position. I pulled the letter from the side pocket of my linen bag, set it on the table between us without unfolding it. The logo alone made his shoulders shift. Custodian. $32,000 a year. With a staff badge. My voice stayed even. That's not a position. That's a message. You don't get how these things work. There's a chain of... There's an order, I cut in, and I'm at the top of it. He flinched barely. I reached down and opened the folder beside me. Inside, a single sealed envelope. Hartwell's board invitation. My signature below the new voting ratio. I handed it to him. The seal caught the light like polished glass. He didn't move to open it, just stared at the weight of it. That's real, I nodded once. He stood without a word, the bag of pastry still dangling from his hand like a forgotten errand. At the sidewalk, he turned back. This'll kill him? He's lucky it's me, I said quietly, because someone else would have let him drown. The wind lifted the corner of the letter as he walked away. I pressed it back down and went inside to check Thursday's courier delivery slot. 12 years ago, I stood in a Wells Fargo branch off Apache Boulevard with my fingers curled around a ballpoint pen. The teller had to double-check the amount twice. $600,000 wired from a quiet Nevada holding firm into a liquidity rescue package for Hartwell Development. They were bleeding from a failed marina project and a supplier lawsuit. The banks circled like buzzards. Landon called it market turbulence. Dax called it someone else's problem. I called Julian and asked how fast we could move. The money arrived in time to save their flagship site. I wasn't mentioned in the recovery memo. Just a footnote in silence. Now I stood in the shade of a tin awning at Pima Community College, watching a girl named Jay test her new espresso cart's wheels. She wore a backward cap and a sunflower apron. I'd taught her 2 semesters of small business finance. She got a B+, mostly because she challenged every model in the textbook. You're sure? She gestured to the vinyl wrap already half installed. You really want it to say Quinn Brew? You'll forget who funded it if it says anything else. She grinned and tore the backing off the logo sticker. Back in the car, I checked the time. 2:38 p.m. The hotel parking garage buzzed with quiet air conditioning and the soft whir of golf carts. Julian was already in the suite when I arrived. Papers fanned across the table, his tablet glowing with the board packet. A tray of tea sat untouched beside a folded linen napkin. He slid the final document toward me, a brass paperweight anchoring the corners. I took out my fountain pen. The same one Dax once lifted off the kitchen counter, rolled between his fingers, and laughed. Said it looked like something a 1920s banker would use. Said real money didn't smell like ink anymore. I pressed the nib to the page and signed without blinking. Julian nodded and reached for the courier envelope. Outside, the Arizona sky burned clear and hot. The kind of sky people forget to look up at when they think everything important is below them. I tucked the pen into its case and walked out. The glass doors whispered open as I stepped onto the carpet. Conference room B smelled faintly of citrus polish and old, money wood-paneled walls, a wall-length screen dark as a pond before dawn, 12 seats around the table, but only one chair with the Hartwell family crest carved into its back. That one had always been reserved for Landon. I wore the soft beige pantsuit Dax once called bland as oatmeal. The folder in my hand matched the grain of the long table, black leather, sharp corners. Nothing flashy. Just clean. Several men from the development arm were already seated, murmuring about projections. They went silent as I walked to the far end of the table and placed a brass nameplate beside the crest-backed chair. The nameplate bore my full name, Maristella Quinn Hartwell. One of the men adjusted his tie. Another cleared his throat like something had caught. Landon entered with 2 aides trailing behind. He froze in the doorway, eyes locking on the nameplate first, then on me. Dax was 2 steps behind him, neck rigid, jaw clenched. He didn't speak, just slid into a chair without looking in my direction. Julian sat across from me. He opened his tablet, tapped once, and leaned back. I placed my folder flat on the table and opened it. As my fingers smoothed the top page, I spoke. As of last Friday at 4:19 p.m., my holding firm, Pomegranate Loop Holdings, finalized the acquisition of all previously private floating shares in Hartwell Development. That brings total ownership to 49%. The silence was not quiet. It was stunned. Landon's mouth opened, closed, then twitched upward like he couldn't decide whether to laugh or shout. That's impossible. You're not even on the trust. The shares weren't in the trust. I slid the official statement toward the corporate counsel. The logo gleamed in the light like a new coin. Across the table, Dax stared at the floor tiles, one finger tracing the groove between grout lines. Landon's voice cracked. "What the hell are you planning to do with it?" I closed the folder gently. "I'm here to vote. And to make sure the janitorial position stays vacant." Julian reached for the next agenda item. The meeting continued. Landon leaned forward, both hands gripping the polished table like it might float away. "I want proof. Right now. You think you can waltz in here, claim nearly half my company, and no one demands receipts." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. I reached into the leather folder again, pulled out the bound stack of documents with the embossed seal Kowalski, Price, and Kent. The boardroom screen flickered on. Julian had already cued the files. The first slide, a flowchart of Hartwell Development's debt service ladder from 2010 to 2015. A line of red, then one sudden spike in liquidity. The second 3 wire transfers in the first quarter of 2011 totaling $600,000 from a private account held under Pomegranate Loop Holdings. The third, the original charter. My initials were faint in the margin. Landon squinted at the screen. "You manipulated your way in." I turned the next page. "You signed off on these emergency influx authorizations yourself. You didn't read the footnotes." "You never do." He pushed back from the table, breath shallow. A soundless cough rose in his throat, but nothing came out. I looked at Julian. Next slide. The image filled the room, a scanned envelope from 12 years ago, addressed to Landon's office. Inside, a brief thank you from the investor who kept Hartwell solvent during the commercial lending freeze. Signed only QH. I wrote that under a pseudonym. Quinn Hartwell was my mother's maiden name. A pause settled into the room like desert dust. Board member Choi leaned forward. "Would you consider interim control while we assess next steps?" I folded my hands in my lap. My wedding band scraped lightly against the folder's edge. "I'm not interested in revenge, but I am interested in accountability." Landon's hand trembled as he reached for his coffee. The mug tipped. Liquid pooled across the table's surface, dark and spreading. No one moved to blot it. I met Julian's gaze. Let's vote. The hallway outside Conference Room B still hummed with air conditioning and tension. I found him by the framed oil painting of the Catalina foothills, his back to me, hands shoved in his blazer pockets. He didn't turn. So that was your plan. His voice came low. Humiliate my father in front of the board. I stepped closer. The carpet soft under my heels. Your father offered me a janitorial position. During dinner, in front of guests. I didn't humiliate him. He handled that himself. You blindsided us. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folded note. The handwriting was unmistakably Landon's. You deserve purpose, Maristella. We're offering you a stable role, something respectful. You called this respectful. He flinched. You told him I was on state assistance. I continued steady now. You told him I was a burden, that I lived off your generosity. He turned, then eyes wide. You looked through my emails. I nodded. And your phone logs. You know what else I found? I didn't wait for a response. You sent the appraisal report for my duplex to his office last year. You tried to convince him I was faking equity to get on the family trust. That was a precaution. No Dax. That was betrayal. I slid the wedding ring from my finger, thin platinum, the same one I wore while transferring $600,000 to keep his family's company alive. My palm hovered over the console by the guest bathroom. The hallway smelled faintly of bergamot and industrial wax. I laid the ring down, not tossed, not dramatic, just final. I supported your sister through her second divorce. I covered your nephew's community college tuition for 2 years. I paid every copay for your mother's physical therapy down to the last bottle of supplements. And you still told them I contributed nothing. His throat bobbed, but no words came. I adjusted my folder under one arm and stepped past him. The ring stayed behind. So did he. I never once looked back. But I heard his shoes didn't move. The planter was still there, wide terracotta glazed along the rim with hairline cracks, spidering near the base. A neglected rosemary bush had turned brittle inside dry stems, tangled with old mulch. I slipped the folded card beneath the soil line, tucked behind the thickest root. It wasn't much, just a short message written on pale cardstock. In clean blue ink, I funded you once. You called it luck. Never again. No name, no signature, just truth. The morning sun cut sharp angles against the mansion's columns. Someone had left yesterday's party streamers sagging above the gate. A champagne cork lay half-smashed beside the fountain. I adjusted my scarf and walked down the path without looking back. By noon, I was home. The adobe walls of my duplex held the warmth from the sun, and the kitchen smelled faintly of lime and toasted almonds. 3 folding chairs sat open beneath the awning, out back next to a low table, with fruit salad in ceramic bowls, iced hibiscus tea sweating into glass tumblers, and a pitcher lined with mint. They came on time, 2 young women from Mesa College and 1 nervous boy from Tempe Tech. The girl in the sunflower print dress asked if I had always worked in finance. I smiled and told her the story of my first budgeting class, how I taught it in a classroom with flickering lights and a broken thermostat, and how one student bought his first home 2 years later, using what he learned. The boy asked why I gave out scholarships without names attached. I let that one hang in the air while we shared a quiet bite of cantaloupe, because not all gifts need an audience. Laughter came easy after the second glass of tea. The sun dipped lower behind the stucco fence, turning the potted aloe leaves gold. I handed out manila envelopes, tuition covered through spring, plus stipends for books. One girl cried. The boy couldn't stop staring at the check. After they left, I rinsed the dishes in the sink and watered the ferns on the windowsill. Then I opened my planner. There were still things to finish. The boardroom smelled like cedar polish and panic. Sunlight cut through the narrow slats of the window blinds, striping the table with pale bars. One of the assistants had replaced the floral arrangement white orchids, this time cold and deliberate. I took my seat without a word. My folder was thinner than last time. Everything important had already been said. Chairman Patel adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and read the motion leadership restructuring effective immediately. A pause. Landon leaned back, arms folded. His face was gray around the mouth like a man who'd finally realized the knife had been sharp the whole time. I abstain. Dax didn't look up from the edge of the table. No. The rest, Choi, Patel, Lin, and Vance, voted yes one after the other, voices steady, deliberate. Motion passed. I didn't smile. Instead, I opened my folder, slid out a single page, and placed it face up on the table, the new development org chart scaffolding lines drawn in my own hand. No titles above mine, only below. They watched in silence. I ran my fingers across the edge of the document, then folded it back inside the folder and rose. You offered me a mop. Landon's knuckles tightened around the chair arms. I built your scaffolding. The clock ticked behind me, 10:41 a.m. No one moved to speak. I left the folder on the table and walked to the door. My shoes made no sound on the polished floor. By the time the chairman began reading closing remarks, I was already in the elevator descending past floors lined with blueprints I had once funded in silence. The lobby felt too cold. The receptionist gave a shallow nod as I passed. Outside, the sky was clean and unclouded. I walked toward the curb, where my rideshare was waiting, a black sedan with its rear door already open. The driver asked if I needed the AC. I told him no. There was something better in the heat, something honest, something dry and sharp and alive. I rested my hand on the doorframe before stepping in. There was one more stop I had to make. The sun settled low over the roofline, casting a soft copper glaze across the stucco. Shadows from the agave leaves reached long and blue across the flagstone path. The wind chime on the corner hook stirred once 3 hollow notes no more. I glanced toward it. My aunt had given it to me the winter after my husband passed, when I couldn't sit still for 5 minutes without needing to do something useful. She told me it was meant to remind me that small things could move air. Inside the living room held the kind of quiet that didn't ask for attention. A kettle had cooled untouched. The reports on my tablet glowed faintly on the side table. I reached for them once more, scanned the last few charts. 2 community projects were ahead of schedule. One artisan incubator in Tucson had returned its loan 5 months early. I closed the file. Another notification blinked in. A new message flagged urgent. The subject line read Seed Funding Request, Mesa-based ESL Cafe Pilot. I opened it. A young woman, daughter of a former student, wanted to turn her garage into a weekend cafe for local families learning English. She'd attached photos of folding tables, chalk menus, and a promise I'll match whatever you give. Just help me start. A soft breath pushed from my chest. I didn't answer yet. I stood, slipped on my walking shoes, and stepped out through the back door. The patio light hadn't flicked on yet. I didn't need it. The path was familiar, lined with cracked red tile, spiny succulents, and the low hum of desert crickets coming to life. At the end of the path, I paused beneath the palo verde. Its branches were bare now, reaching like open hands into the amber sky. A breeze moved past my collarbone. The wind chime behind me stirred again. 3 notes, no more. I thought of the boardroom, of the ring left on polished wood, of the silence that followed me out. And then I thought of the girl with her chalkboard dreams. I kept walking. The light behind me faded. The one ahead didn't need to be turned on.